What is up, guys? Welcome back to yet another Trek, the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on Volume 14, Chapter 3, and this series continues to get crazy. I'm already feeling, I don't know if I'm going to like this volume. It is not putting me through a good state right now, but that's a sign of really good writing, so we'll see how things go from here on, but yes, as per usual, thanks to everybody that dropped by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Make sure to hit the like button right now. You can hit dislike later. That's how I trap you. But yes, as per usual, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, memberships, all that good stuff. And yes, all your guys' kind words. It means so much to me. It's been a really great ride, but yeah, let's just get right into it, because there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover. I think Chapter 3 is extremely long, if I remember correctly, so we got some stuff to get through. But yes, Chapter 3, The Past, and a Curse, Summoning, and Jealousy. 200 years ago, a girl was rescued from a labyrinth. We already know this is Elinalise, right? We already know this is her. She lost all of her memories and emotions. No idea who she was, only that she was an elf because she looked like one. Thus, she was placed in an elven settlement and resumed life there. The people welcomed her, even though she was a stranger. Her memories never returning, but emotions did after a few years. It's already sounding just like Zenith. It's already sounding exactly like Zenith. Except Zenith seems to be at least acknowledging people. I mean, she picked up the armor, and that's a really big sign there. Doing things like picking the weeds and stuff like that. It's signs that she's actually getting something of her old self back. She was cheerful and sociable, and soon fell in love. However, after they became intimate, she began to experience a problem. Her libido spiked. So this would be the point when she started getting thirsty. She wanted to have sex every night. Elves weren't inclined to frequent intimacy compared to humans and goblins. I don't know, are goblins in this world similar to like Goblin Slayer? Like they always have to be procreating? While her partner struggled to keep up, they lived in harmony. However, something strange happened to her body about the same time. She started birthing small magical crystals every month. Finally, we can get that one out of the way, because the chat can't shut up about that one. This has been something that I got sick of at some point, is the chat could not shut up about this. Where's she getting those gems from? Wonder where she's getting those gems from. Every time the discussion came about her pulling a gem out of nowhere, or just about her curse in general, nobody could shut up about where the gem come from. And it's like, okay, I can assume now. Thanks, guys. You guys can't shut up about this. I'm just happy to get it out of the way. At some point, it was like it kind of made sense based on people constantly saying that. So that whole mystery's gone. But it's fine. Whatever. It's not a big, massive spoiler. I don't care anymore. Inside was an incredibly dense accumulation of mana. When she told her husband, he was unnerved by it, but assured her there was nothing to worry about. Then he started selling them in a human town. He's selling her babies? What? I think if she's okay with it, it's fine. It's like, what else are you going to do with them? It seemed like his eyes were clouded by greed. One could hardly blame him for coveting the money they earned him. He had never been rich, and his wife didn't work. At least the man never treated her like a money tree. I mean, I could see finding that obviously very tantalizing and why not kind of thing, but yeah. I mean, even the initial impression on the idea of her saying, hey, this is something that's coming out of me, and him assuring her from that, doesn't necessarily seem like, unless the greed hit him right then, man, I can make a bunch of money for these. I know exactly what these are. I know exactly how much money they make. I don't necessarily see him as a bad person, but tragedy struck 5 years later when the husband died. Rather, he was murdered. His cargo of expensive crystals caught the attention of bandits. They took his life and his wealth. And now it all starts. That was like the beginning part of the downward spiral of Elinalise. She could have been so happy just living that life. I guess that probably is the negative aspect of him actually selling them, is they probably could have just hid them and just enjoyed their life. Now a widow, she fell into depression, yet endured. It unfortunately only took 10 days before she craved a man again. Despite knowing it was wrong, she found a willing man in the village to stave it off. 10 days passed, another man. 10 more, again. It didn't take long for word to get out of her appetite, and women drove her out. So that would be the point where she just got driven out of the forest itself. But it doesn't mention anything about laws. That's the curious thing there. I would assume that this would be like the starting point for laws as well, but this seems to be something that was probably way before then. We don't know how old Laws is, but the assumption here is that she may have fled with Laws, but it doesn't necessarily mention him, so that could have been something that came later. During the time that she was traveling and pretty much destroying any relationships he has because of that, before she eventually cultivated this way of actually handling people properly. And, knowing those boundaries. Because it's something she's going to have to figure out. Again, she just woke up basically 200 years ago. She's technically 200 years old. I mean, eventually she could unlock her memories and then we can get an idea of how old she is. But right now she's technically 200 years. So she's got to figure out those boundaries. And maybe this was that point where she went out, started causing issues elsewhere, eventually, birthed laws, and then, left laws in Buena Village. My assumption early on was that this was going to be the starting point for that. She birthed laws and then was driven out or something like that. She then became a prostitute and a slave. Finally, an adventurer. It's said that to this day, she continues to wander the world. And that was Elinalise's story. That was very short, brief, to the point. And that's basically what my life has been like, Elinalise said. She came to Perugius first thing in the morning to tell him her story. He didn't have to tell me everything. He was honestly stunned. Despite only needing to know about the curse, she spared no detail. Immediately when I read this, I'm like, well, if you think about it from Elinalise's perspective, she just got her face pushed in because she said nothing. Literally, Perugius was like, why did you say anything? You have him right. Somebody right here knows everything that you could possibly know about this. She's like a case right here of it. Ask her. Why didn't you say anything to this boy? Don't you know him? And so she's like, well, it's like that auto-correcting. Okay, I'm going to suddenly just say everything because I want to make sure I don't spare any details. Additionally, there is a good aspect about this. She might not know a detail within the story that she's saying that could possibly be something that triggers something for Perugius. She's like, yeah, the curse is like about this, I think. That doesn't tell him anything. But if she tells him her whole story, he could probably pick up on something. There's a pattern here that oh yeah, that's right. You didn't see it, but I've seen Zenith do this. And you just told me about that. So there might be a connection there. There's actually a good thing about saying all the details. That's why reports of incidents and stuff are so important. You might find something in it that's actually important that the person that wrote it didn't think it was important. This is my way of making up for not telling you anything sooner. So, does Cliff know about this already? Of course, I told him everything before our wedding. Oh, okay. What about Sylphie? She doesn't know. I doubt she wants to know that her grandmother once sold her body for money. He shrugged. I don't think Sylphie would care about that kind of thing. I just hope that you won't look at her in a different light if you hear ill rumors about me elsewhere. She may have my blood running through her, but she's just a normal girl. I know. I would never do that to her. This is that constant thing where she can constantly thinks, I've destroyed so many things, and I want you to know she's different. Don't worry, she's different. I know I'd argue that she's just as thirsty, but that was that whole joke back there. But I do like the fact that she was very clear with Cliff, like everything about herself. Again, that kind of goes that whole thing where he initially introduced Cliff to Elinalise. He said, just say everything and he'll probably leave. That's the best thing, just to be perfectly clear with him. That way he doesn't feel like he's betrayed and he comes back to me. It actually turned out to be a good thing because Cliff is very understanding, accepting, because he does. It was literally love at first sight. He didn't care about anything else. I'm going to fix this situation and we're going to be together. Sylphie wasn't responsible for Elinalise may have done in the past. Still, after hearing all this, it made sense that she wanted to keep it a secret, as well as her relationship to Sylphie. And there's another aspect of that. I really don't like that mindset that because somebody is the child of somebody else, that they bear their burdens. Like every terrible thing this person did, obviously this kid is responsible for it. And people continuously harass them because of what their parents did. It's like that debt acceptance thing that you shouldn't have. So what is your curse exactly? The mana in my body builds up and coalesces into magic crystals. If I don't receive a man's seed, the mana will continue to build up inside until it kills me. That's actually kind of what I was assuming the whole case situation was going to actually be. But you were fine for the first couple of years, right? I honestly don't entirely understand that either. At the time, I wasn't having any monthly cycles. So maybe it had something to do with that. Your monthly... Perugius trailed off in thought. If it had something to do with her menstrual cycle, maybe it was her ova that was transforming into magical crystals. In that case, Zenith's curse was probably something different altogether. He assumed that she still had her monthly visits. After all, she had already given birth to 2 children. Although Lilia didn't give any details, she was still only 35 years old. Yeah, that all kind of makes sense. I guess what it kind of makes me believe is because of that brief time before she was actually starting to be active again, maybe it was an aspect of being paused. Maybe it just took that time period before it started kind of triggering. Now, the question mark becomes, what does this have to do with what Perugius said? This idea that these crystals would trap people inside of them, and they would use them as sort of a way of making it more efficient. And that would sort of make sense if it's being drawn into... I'm curious if it's specifically only females. Because of their organs. Maybe it's possibly that they don't draw in or capture males because they don't have the same organs. And maybe that's something that is actually essential in order to condense that mana or something like that. It turns into a very... It kind of reminds me of that aspect of the early days of Goblin Slayer and how everybody was outraged by that series. And it's like, but it makes sense. Like, it's so unsettling. It's so screwed up, but it makes sense. And this is another case of that. I'm already knowing that Refugion's probably got like some insane details that goes into this whole process. And it does, again, make me believe that there's a possibility this curse might actually be specific to the female anatomy. And thus, I don't know necessarily that even though Elinalise wants to believe that it's something else, that it will be something else. I'm already kind of feeling that there's a possibility that Zenith is going to be the same situation. This might be something that's very specific. It's not that the mana gets in there and disturbs things and causes them to be a cursed child or a blessed child, whatever. But in actuality, that's exactly what it does. It's doing that specific thing to them for the sake of producing, or at least condensing that mana. Mainly, Elinalise's curse has everything to do with condensing mana, so it makes sense. Now, granted, when they're in that crystal, there's nothing to supply them a man's juice in order to make it turn into a crystal, but maybe it doesn't need that when it's inside the crystal. It just needs it to condense it. And plus, it doesn't necessarily care if the person inside of it dies. But them being stuck inside the crystal might keep them from dying, because obviously, Zenith hasn't aged. So maybe being inside that crystal keeps you from having that happen. Once you're released from the crystal, there's nothing to keep you from dying. Rudy spoke up, but your memories never came back. She shook her head. No, even now, I don't remember anything. Which meant she didn't even know exactly who she was. There was a slim chance that she could suddenly remember someday. But if she hadn't in 200 years, it seemed unlikely she ever would. That's that aspect that kind of puts a death knell in for Zenith, that idea of, if Elinalise hasn't recovered in 200 years, then what chance does Zenith have? She might have, in this type of world, maybe another 40 years to her at most. I don't know really technically the life expectancy average of this world that he's in, but you can assume like maybe 60 years old or something like that at the most. That sucks. That doesn't give her much time to really recover, plus make good on that time that she's lost. But again, she's doing well and it's seemingly getting a lot of her memories back. Zenith's condition is different than mine. Judging by how she acts, it seems she knows who her children are. Perhaps she may regain all of her memories. I hope you're right. What about her curse? At the moment, she isn't showing any signs of having one like mine. Ah, I didn't think so. She most likely has a different curse on her. Really? I think there's a distinct possibility. Do you have any idea what the curse could be? Now that's the weird comment there. She says at the moment she isn't showing signs of having the curse like mine. Which makes me wonder, does she know about her having a cycle or something like that and not getting huffy puffy despite that? Because again, she claimed that she wasn't having a cycle. Possibly that Zenith already has that. Or maybe she's looking for other signs that she didn't mention to Rudius that she had before it started actually happening. Things that she attributes to it. Rudius thought about a vague one, but nothing conclusive. Nope, nothing. All right, well, best to continue keeping an eye on her. Whatever it wasn't lethal. However, there could be a trigger out there somewhere that could cause it to manifest. I think this is kind of interesting in the idea that it possibly suggesting that maybe Elinalise sleeping with her husband was the trigger. Like it got that... This is getting very descriptive. I'm trying to keep it vague at the same time. She got some injection, and that caused the whole system to start kicking up. It's like it's just sitting there waiting, just sitting there waiting. And then so the moment something feeds it, it suddenly is hungry. And it's like, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. And it keeps creating crystals out of it. Give me more, give me more. But if it was like, almost as if it's like in a stop state until that happened, yes, it sort of gives to the idea that if Zenith has the same thing as Elinalise, possibly never bed again. It might actually be the way to keep it from happening. And again, possibly might be an aspect of the uncomfortable truth of how this whole system works in general. You feed it, it activates. Which turns into, my mind's going, this is crazy. I almost want to say that it would be a cool idea to like send out word to all countries and everything. If you ever discover somebody trapped in a labyrinth, don't ever have them sleep with somebody again. But then there would be a lot of people be like, oh yeah, that's a great way to make money. Just don't mention what it activates if it happens. Just say it kills them. But I was kind of curious what Rudius, I kind of wish that he said what he thought. He says, I have a vague one. And he doesn't mention it ever again at this point, and it kind of bugs me because I kind of want to know what his idea is. I'm assuming he's probably already theorizing the same as I am, that she's able to essentially cause other things to have some sort of mana alteration, like the whole thing with the plant. the moment she comes home with Rudius, again, I thought Rudius's large amount of mana maybe fed into it. It might be Zenith. She might be able to make creatures come alive. But again, my other theory was the idea of her being able to possibly know when danger is there or something like that, or at least read Lucy's mind. But we'll see. I guess that's all we can do right now, huh? Keep watching her? Yes. He wouldn't get his hopes up, but couldn't help praying nothing bad would happen. This is extensive what I know right now. I'm sorry. There was too much I didn't want to say. And I was late in giving you the truth. She lowered her head. He'd be a hypocrite if he got mad at her. Sure, it sucked that she didn't say anything sooner, but he also felt guilty that he didn't share his previous life with Sylphie and Roxy. You technically did. Rudius, you technically did. I think Sylphie's already figuring it out. I mean, that whole comment that she made back during the wedding, and then yes, this technically here coming up, she sort of mentioned something. Roxy, again, he divulged the whole thing. He didn't divulge details or anything like that, but he did give a sense that Rudius, that he was from a previous world. All the details within there of where he was at, what was around him is obviously vague, but he did tell her about that. Again, she picked up on it and mentioned the idea of you're wanted here. She didn't say the person you're talking about. She says, Rudius, you. No, I appreciate you talking about it even though you didn't feel comfortable. Thank you. He extended his hand. She shook it, gripping it tight. I love these two. I just love these two so much. They've been through so much, and they're just good. They're just good bros. Cis bros. What do you want to call it? Partners in crime. They're literally partners in crime because she gets him to do so many things he doesn't normally want to do. With that, Elinalise returned to Cliff, and Rudius decided to rest a little bit before checking on Nanahoshi. In the end, he didn't learn anything about Zenith's condition. There was a chance that she had a curse, but it didn't cause any issues yet. All he could do was prepare himself to act when something did happen. After breakfast, Rudius, Nanahoshi, Cliff, and Zenoba met with Silvaro. As part of the agreement, Perugius would help Nanahoshi learn summoning, but Nanahoshi was kind enough to ask if they would be included. They started with the basics, so Perugius wasn't the one teaching them. Rudius assumed that he was having tea with Ariel at the moment. That apparently is not going well. Oh god, I forgot her voice. Son of a biscuit. Silvaro spoke up. First, let's make sure you're all on the same page. What is summoning magic? You there. Cliff Glimrar. Cliff, please answer me. What is summoning magic? There was two types of summoning magic. First was bestowal, which was mostly used to create magical implements. I don't remember this. Maybe I'm just like fogging on my memory of this. Maybe I disconnected it myself. There's like a mixture aspect here. As technically, I haven't talked about a lot of this first introductions into magical implements. That was way back a long time ago. So maybe I forgot how they were connecting the two of them. I know they specifically said that enchantment was supposedly connected to summoning, but that was about the only thing they ever mentioned. I never seen anything that said why they are connected, why it is. And here it's literally saying, yes, these two are two types. Like it's finally going, these are two types. But it still doesn't make sense to me. Again, it can go back to my old goofy theory and the idea that it's somehow connecting objects to other objects to make them similar to objects of another world. But it's still odd that this is even labeled as a summoning magic. It doesn't make sense to me. Which was mostly used to create magical implements. In other words, the drawing of summoning circles. Cliff specialized in this, and it was big in Shariah. Second was invocation, which is used to summon anything in existence. That's what I would think summoning is. From simple animals to intelligent beasts. It could also be used to summon spirits that exist somewhere out in the world. No professors in Shariah could perform invocation magic. While amateurs, even the guild only had a few people that could. Maybe another country was monopolizing that school of magic. We're already going to assume that. Yes, I'll assume that too. I'll go with you on that one, Rudius. Everything else seems to be monopolized. Why not? Or maybe it was just simply that no one in Shariah could teach it. Cliff's knowledge was about the same as Rudius's, because he relayed the same thing. That's correct, Silvaro said, shaking her head. It is true that summoning requires magic circles by nature, but the drawing of a circle is not in itself part of the school of magic. I can see that. Again, it kind of goes back to what Rudius said about the whole idea of, essentially there being two types of magic in general. Way back in Volume 1, I think, is where they kind of mentioned this idea that, yes, you can draw circles for pretty much everything, or you can do the incantation itself. And I think he mentioned at that point that even in some cases, drawing it was better because there was so much to the incantation, but I might be misremembering that. Which means only the latter qualifies as summoning magic then? Rudius thought about how the atmosphere currently was like getting lessons from Roxy when he was a child. Kind of this idea of him sitting there and this lady is talking to him. He talks often about how gentle her voice is. And so it kind of reminds him of when he was being taught by Roxy and she was telling him all this information and he's just sponging it up. It's kind of cute. Yes, but Cliff wasn't wrong when he said that it was 2 types of summoning magic. In other words, Bastalwa isn't one of those types? Indeed, there are 2 types of summoning magic. Fiend summoning and spirit summoning. Pause. This is another one of those cases where I don't know that maybe I interpreted this all already before, but I'm pretty sure all this stuff was explained by Nanahoshi, and I even went back and checked it, and yes, Nanahoshi explains all of this. So I'm not sure why Rudius is once again learning the same thing that he learned before. It even gets in the whole aspect of programming summons and stuff like that, spirits that weren't from the barren world. All that stuff was explained by Nanahoshi, and yet it feels like right here, Rudius is learning all this again. And so it's like one of those aspects of, did Refugin just have a lapse of forgetfulness? Is he just having Rudius relearn it because maybe at some point he bumped his head? maybe I missed a point where he hit his head, and maybe when he was in the labyrinth, he hit his head and he lost part of that memory? I don't know. It just seems kind of weird because it feels like we're just kind of going through a lot of stuff again. Rudius remembers spirits were beings that existed in their world, but rarely showed themselves. Only kind he had seen was lamplight spirits summoned from a scroll. Again, he's acting as if these are spirits from this world. Again, Nanahoshi told him these were programmed. They're not from the barren world. And she specifically said, don't tell anybody that you know this or that you believe this because it will make people upset. Because the idea is that you're able to summon spirits and they believe that it's real people from the barren world. And if you tell them that it's all programmed spirits, it might upset people. What's the difference between the two of those? Fiend summoning, as you well know, allows you to call upon a beast living somewhere in the wild. Per an ancient covenant, anything considered to be a person cannot be summoned. However, everything else that exists in this world can be. I immediately jumped on that per the ancient covenant. I'm like, what? Like, what? At some point they said, no. Like, there's a bunch of people gathered around and they're like, yeah, this is pretty cool stuff. Yeah, let's try this. Oh, wow, it actually works. You know what? Let's not allow humans to happen. And it's like, okay. Like, what does that do? Like, are you creating a spell that locks down the world and the universe itself to never allow it? That's the question mark. Is it like ancient beings? But again, my mind immediately goes to the idea of maybe the workaround that is going to be people from another world. Somebody like Nanahoshi, somebody like Rudius. They can break those rules because they're not from this world. But the question mark remains, what initially pulled them there to allow them to break those rules? Is there somebody else that's not of this world? Somebody like the Dragon God. Again, humans, if I remember correctly, this world they're in right now is the human world. There used to be multiple worlds, but because of the Dragon God, he was going around destroying everything, and they all eventually end up on this one world. What if the people that are not native to this world can still do that? Or does it require people from an alternate dimension, an alternate world, like Earth or something like that, to be drawn there? Reese thought all kinds of creatures, even dragons? What's this ancient covenant? Thank you. I'm so glad he actually asked. I was like, oh, please ask. Please don't not ask about that statement. When summoning magic was first born in this world, our ancestors made a covenant. Magic cannot break those ancient rules, so people can't be summoned. Was that really true? What's so different between teleporting and summoning people? Not that it mattered, the important thing was to get down to basics. He could ask about the nuanced questions later. He asked her to continue. No, Rudius, keep asking questions, damn it. I hate when he just, no, we'll worry about that later. But no, it is one of those aspects of like, but Nanahoshi, I mean, you have literally an example of Nanahoshi, but again, that goes back to the whole idea of maybe it is an aspect of there is summoning magic, and summoning magic might be that aspect of programming and creating things, or pulling them from another location, but what happened with Rudius and what happened to Nanahoshi wasn't summoning. Perhaps what happened to them was teleportation. But then again, we're questioning right now, what's the difference? They're both technically teleportation. They're bringing you from A to B. Which, yes, that kind of in the back of my head starts to make me question the idea of possibly what if Rudius and Nanahoshi are creations by that programming. The idea of using this certain type of summoning like they use with lamplight spirits and stuff like that, where possibly Rudius and everything that he knows, what if it's all created? What if somebody created that old world for him and his memories and had him birthed in this world? With Nanahoshi was also programmed to think that she was from this other world, but she was manifest in this world at that time. No mana, from another world, all that kind of stuff. That would be weird. That would be super, I don't know that I want that, because that would get in that realm of the whole, it was all a dream, and I don't really like that, but it is one of those aspects of the rare cases that I've run into stories that are similar to that. If they're told right, they are absolute gut punches. This idea of you were never reality. So far, all continued. Very well.
In fiend summoning, one cannot invoke a creature with more mana than they possess themselves. Even if they do so, there's a high likelihood they wouldn't be able to control the creature they summon.
This made Rudius recall Sig's summoning magic book that he got from Nanahoshi. I immediately thought the same thing. It was the one where the person summoned a beast that was too powerful for them and it killed them, and then it caused their pupil to basically always fear or be cautious of summoning something with more mana than themselves. Considering he had a vast mana pool, he probably wouldn't have that issue, but he had no idea if they would obey him or not. Not that he had plans of summoning anything powerful. He already had 3 pets in the house. I was like, 3? Did we bring the horse home? Because I know Dillo and the Groot's there, but I don't know that he ever brought the horse home, unless he's talking about Aisha or something. I already have a pet. Her name's Aisha. She's a crazy little animal. Oh yeah, are living creatures the only thing you can summon?
Yes, you cannot summon the dead.
No, I mean things like, could you summon some clothes from my house right now?
I'm afraid that's impossible.
I totally forgot that this is like one of his primary goals. Like when he was first like into the idea of doing summoning magic, he immediately was like, man, I wish that I could pull Roxy's Pantsu from wherever she's at to me. And again, I can imagine that all idea suddenly she's walking and suddenly just goes, oh crap, what just happened? So he couldn't summon Roxy's Pantsu. Wait, Nanahoshi summoned a plastic bottle. Surely it wasn't impossible. Maybe it was more that people hadn't figured out how to do it yet, which would explain Perugius' interest in Nanahoshi's research. Because now it meant that it was possible. That's why he agreed to aid her. Again, this all goes back to the idea that what if this is just because that nobody has done it before? That because of all this stuff, magic itself that has been presented in the story has always been this concept of just knowing the incantation, knowing how it works, knowing out the ins and outs, knowing the programming code for a summoning circle or whatever to create something. It's all in how everything is basically programming in this world. It essentially all is programming. And if somebody doesn't know how to program it yet, somebody has to figure out how to do it. And once they've figured out how to do it, it suddenly becomes possible. Savaro is just saying what she believes because that's all she knows. What if somebody breaks those rules? What if Nanahoshi breaks those rules? Or again, is it because Nanahoshi is able to do it because she's not of this world? When normally, most people in the world are locked to these certain rules.
Spirit summoning, as the name implies, involves the creation of a spirit.
Creation? Are you actually making them? Again, Rudius, you know this already. I made a joke with somebody. I'm like, it sucks that this repeats this stuff, but it's also an aspect of maybe when Nanahoshi was explaining it to Rudius, he was doing the same thing that he was doing with Roxy, trying to look up her skirt the entire time and not listening.
Correct, you expend mana in the process and create a spirit with certain abilities, such as how spirit summoning operates.
Meaning the scroll for the Lamplight Spirit wasn't summoning from elsewhere, but creating them with its own mana. Again, we know this.
Spirits possess a low level of intelligence and will obey the summoner's orders until they use up all their mana.
Is that an absolute?
No, if you specifically construct the circle in a way that they won't follow your orders, then a spirit with free will shall be created instead.
It was almost like programming, which, speaking of programming, he almost felt like he heard a similar concept before. Cliff spoke up almost sounding dissatisfied. That seems odd to me. Those of you who served Perugius were spirits summoned 400 years ago, yes? You're awfully intelligent if that's the case, and it's odd that you haven't disappeared yet. Reese commended Cliff in his mind, noticing an inconsistency. Savaro nodded cheerfully.
I'm glad that you brought that up. Lord Perugius' predecessor, the first Armored Dragon King, passed on his knowledge on how to create 11 ancient, highly intelligent, powerful spirits. Ordinarily, spirits of such caliber would not last more than a single day, but Lord Perugius has developed a way to maintain them for centuries.
That's interesting. Very interesting. She sounded boastful, and Rudius could see why. This was quite the feat to maintain for such a period of time. It was perpetual motion, a concept that was just as incredible in his previous life as this one. Yeah, the question mark is, are these spirits essentially self-maintaining themselves? Or does he have something in play that constantly feeds them? That's the question mark. Is it an aspect of just constantly feeding it mana? Or is it an aspect that has to be created in a way that can self-sustain itself? Is the reason that a spirit only lasts so long is because it's not being fed mana? Or is it because it just crumbles in on its own programming? It finds an error and then it disappears. It opens up a massive amount of possibilities. Again, Fujin right here. Rudius spoke up. Do you mean 12?
No, 11. I am not Lord Perugius' spirit.
Rudius blinked. You're not?
Not at all. Lord Perugius saved me during the Laplace's War, and I have served him ever since. I am simply one of the Skyfolks.
That answers that question there. Because my curiosity was, when they first came in there, of course, they were greeted by Savaro, and Savaro was a Skyfolk. And my assumption at that point was, well, if she's one of the different summoned spirits, that might be possibly that he created these spirits in the idea of them being different types of races. Maybe he wanted a skyfolk spirit. Maybe he has an elf spirit. But they only really described her. All the other ones, Rudius described them as human-like. They all look like humans. I didn't want to assume at that point that they were literally looked like humans through and through, but that possibly they all had like a humanoid form. This is sort of pointing out that idea that the rest of them might actually, they're probably going to look unique in some way, but this kind of puts in that idea of, okay, no, this is a singular point here, is that she's just a skyfolk. Yes, I'm getting indications of albedo. I'm getting the indications of albedo here. I'm getting the indications of albedo. Yes, Perugius is Ainz, and he's surrounded by a bunch of spirits that he summoned and programmed to like him. If the others were his servants, perhaps she was more of a confidant or a lover. Nah, that wasn't the only bond that existed in the world. Yeah, it's the assumption that, Perugius could like the skyfolk lady, that's fine. But there is an aspect of like, no, if he saved her life, she may have dedicated herself to him for the rest of hers. Which makes me kind of wonder, what is the life expectancy of a skyfolk? If he saved her during the Laplace War, it's a long time ago. Seems like humans are the only ones that don't last for very long. We got the short end of the stick. So which one will we be learning?
We'll primarily focus on fiend summoning. However, Lord Perugius considers the summoning of things from another world to resemble spirit summoning, so I'm sure that we'll touch on that as well.
That's interesting. And that technically does tie in with what Nanahoshi's been working on this whole time. And again, kind of plays into my theory I made earlier. This idea that spirit summoning might possibly be specifically to be coded, rather than the other being more to just grab an object, grab a certain creature. That was good to hear. Rudius actually thought about summoning monsters across the world and open up a zoo. Okay. Just make a bunch of cages and then summon them inside of him over and over again.
Zenoba spoke up. I would like to learn more about spirit summoning specifically, if possible.
Cliff agreed. I'm interested in that subject too. It finally clicked for Rudius, the word programming. The way that the core of the doll that they had functioned reminded him of programming. Learning spirit summoning might help them complete the doll. While it didn't seem easy to succeed where the maniacal Dragon King Chaos failed, he was sure this magic could be handy all the same. Yeah, I think I was mentioning that idea. That was kind of my theory with how the crystal itself had all these markings on it. And my assumption was that a lot of that could possibly be to kind of pull them all together. But again, it's like everything else in that doll. It's all these circles inscribed everywhere. That's all code. It's all code to tell. It's a nervous system that's created in code with these magic circles. So again, it's one of those aspects of, I thought we established already. I thought we already figured this out, Rudius. But maybe it's just all really more so Refugian in Rudius right now, having him kind of connect and solidify everything together. I can see that as well. Maybe it just doesn't read right in the translation, in him kind of going through all this stuff again. This could just literally be Rudius going, look, I get this. Okay, this is connecting. And maybe the translation didn't really convey that properly. That could also be an issue as well. Rudius was sure that this magic would come in handy all the same.
All right, now let's start by learning the foundations of summoning. First, please look at this magic circle.
Severo started the lesson. Rudius was sadly behind the others on how to draw magic circles. Like a dropout rejoining his peers. He should have learned the basics instead of leaving it to everyone else. But one was never too old to start. He was only 18. Looking at Zenoba, he was in his mid-20s. He came a long way to refine his abilities. Rudius felt that he could learn from his example. Yeah, that's one of those difficult things that, yes, technically as you get older, it's harder for your brain to sort of solidify things. For me personally, when I'm learning things, yeah, when I was younger, like, in like my early teens, it's like a sponge at that point. But as you get older, it's harder to kind of sponge things in. So I've found ways to kind of get around that. Like, typically when I'm trying to learn something, I always write it down as I'm trying to learn it, and it helps it solidify for me. But I am always of the mindset that it's never too late to start something. It's never too late to have a new hobby. It's not too late to learn a new craft. It's always good to keep her. I think that's, in my opinion, I'm not an expert here. Don't take this as actual science. I believe that there's probably an aspect of it's helpful for you and your brain to constantly be trying to learn new things. Keep your brain working, basically. After this lesson, he wanted to put in some revision and practice. Which I'm assuming what he means by revision is this idea of essentially making it his own type of magic. Because again, what Rudius does whenever he learns magic is that he always breaks it in some way so that it's useful in another way. It could be an aspect that he's trying to figure out how to do summoning incantationalist, which is a really cool idea. This idea of him going out into battle and just being able to silently cast a summoning spell and summoning up a fiend or something like that. That would be really, really cool. Or it could be an aspect of him trying to manipulate in some way to do something different, like with the lightning spell, making it turn into a shock that he could do. The night before, they had Oscar and Cuisine. Meatballs and potatoes boiled in herb soup, bread from wheat and grain, similar to what he ate in Shiraya. While it seems simple, from Perugius' standpoint, it wasn't ancient at all. He considered it traditional standard food from 400 years ago. Ossuaran dishes had changed greatly over the 400 years apiece. Reese ate dinner with Sylphie rather than alone in his room, something he never felt lonely about in his previous life. He had really changed since then. Yeah, I do get that idea, that sense of, yeah, typically in his whole life, he just wanted to be in his room and eat there. He didn't want to go out there and eat with his family or anything like that. But now this is like something that he can't be without. He's essentially learned the nicety of eating with another person, and thus he can't be without it anymore. For lunch, Survival volunteered to make whatever they liked. It was convenient having Aramonth able to fetch ingredients from a different country. He just like, go out for food, zip, zip. Cliff asked for something from Millis, and Zenoba from Sharon. They must have missed their homes, no matter how comfortable they acted. Yes, you're always going to miss your home. While Nanahoshi didn't mind what she got, Rudeus knew this was an opportunity that he couldn't let slip by. Again, here's another one where it's like, we did this already. I don't know, this chapter's weird. I'm sorry, I'm going to point this out a lot. Char Aznabal often said to make optimal use of the chance that you get. Like Baga. Watashi no Baga. I remember that stupid commercial with Char Aznabal. So, Rudeus is going to ask for a burger, right? If he's bringing up Char, he's going to be asking for a burger, right? I actually think that the commercial was way after this was wrote, but yeah. Rudeus asked for vinegar-seasoned white rice with fresh raw fish, cut in bite-sized pieces. Nanahoshi got excited by this, but Savaro said that she'd never heard of such a thing, although she knew that there was rice. While Nanahoshi slumped her shoulders, Rudeus was overjoyed to hear this. As long as they had rice, they could find something to go with it. Again, Rudeus, you already know that rice exists in this world. Why is this a big... What? He then requested wheat, water, a raw egg to dip the shrimp in, and fry it with oil. While this too was also beyond her, she did note the existence of wheat, flour, and eggs. Which again, we technically have oil, which meant that they could have raw egg over hot rice. Again, we've done this before, Rudeus. You ate that with Edis. Which makes me also kind of consider the idea that possibly that chapter with Rudeus having rice with egg with Edis, what if that was actually wrote after this? Unsurprisingly, sushi, tempura, and sukiyaki was a no-go. Sukiyaki required boiling soy sauce, sugar, and mirin in a pot. He could put something together though. How about sauce made with fermented soybeans? Either soy sauce or soy paste would be fine. We don't have anything like that in our fortress. As he suspected, no such thing existed here. I have heard, however, that Behiro Kingdom uses a sauce similar to one that you described. We could order Aramonfi to go and search for it. Yes, please. He didn't care if it troubled Aramonfi. If he could search for it, then he might as well. He's like, I don't care if it bothers him. Send him anyways. Which again, we're finally at least there getting a sign that soy sauce exists of some sort. Sadly, Aramonth returned without soy sauce. But he did find a reddish-brown substance that they made with fermented beans. They called it tofu, but Rudeus called it miso instead. It was totally miso. Okay, two things here. One, I do acknowledge that, again, even though I'm criticizing the fact that it seems like we're going through this stuff and discoveries again, even though Rudeus already discovered this stuff, there is another side to this that I am questioning. When Rudeus was going through the Dragon King realm, I was assuming that because they were calling certain things like Nanahoshi Yaki, and that there was a lot of rice fields and they didn't really know how to actually cook it right, my assumption at that point was, what if Nanahoshi was introducing them to these concepts, and that was the reason why they had the rice fields? I don't think so anymore. It didn't really make sense to me that she would have had that much, influence on an entire kingdom to do that. My assumption there was that possibly Orsted was leading the Dragon King realm or something. That was the reason why they were doing that there, is that she told him, hey, can you do this? And he did it, had them do it. But that would take a while to cultivate those lands to be able to do that much rice production. So it kind of lends itself to the idea that, yes, maybe the Nanahoshi was something that she, while she was traveling around with Orsted, introduced to them and they tried it, or a possibility that maybe the realm itself already had the existence of things like rice, and then she introduced that to it as well. So my initial impressions of Nanahoshi being involved with that, probably not so much, but she could have still been involved with this because she wanted that so much. And so she asked, like, again, the Death God, can you make this thing? I would really like this, and he tried to do it. So it leads me to believe that there's a possibility that this is something that has been maybe possibly existing before then. But again, why is Nanahoshi surprised by a lot of this stuff when technically it existed already? The other thing that's kind of curious is why they called that tofu. Even if Rudeus says, no, it's totally miso, why would it be called tofu? That's way too similar to the previous world. And that would be, again, this idea that a concept that was created here, presumably, why would be named the same? Unless it's just coincidence, just like everything else. Why would they call it a horse here when we call it a horse here too? It's not that they adopted the idea of horses from our world. It's just that it's a commonality. Why call eggs eggs? Was that because eggs were created and brought from our world? No, it's, again, a commonality. But dishes and processes are that questionable area there for me. If Rudius recalled correctly, Bahiro Kingdom was located in the northeastern part of the central continent. Yeah, I was kind of, I recognized that name and I couldn't find it when I searched for it, but I seem to remember that he's mentioned that location before. Miso and soy sauce were two sides of the same coin. Maybe they already invented soy sauce there. He would need to go there himself and see, even if it was 10 or 20 years down the road. He gave Servaro a decent recipe with white fish. She returned with a piping hot rice, steam rising from miso-flavored shellfish, even nicely toasted white fish with lemon on 2 plates. One plate had a raw egg for Rudius. Sometimes you gotta treat yourself to some comfort food like this. After a long pause, Nanahoshi replied, yeah, I guess. Nanahoshi looked at it with dismay. Perhaps she disliked that it only resembled Japanese cuisine. He couldn't blame her. It tasted nothing like he remembered. It was fun giving it a go, though. It's kind of like that whole idea of that pot roast thing that we're talking about with the festival. It's like, yeah, just try it. Like, it could be fun. Just see if it's going to probably taste bad, but why not? But yeah, Rudius is finding fun in this idea of possibly recreating it. But immediately when I read this, I'm going, yeah, but to her, this is painful. She hasn't given up on that. You have. Rudius went to dig in. Nanahoshi kept frowning as she picked up her spoon and fork. Her face contorted to disgust as she deboned the fish and squeezed the lemon on it. She took a bite, then hesitated, ate the rice. After sipping the miso soup, she spoke up. This miso soup doesn't have any dashi in it. Big, fat tears welled up in her eyes. She continued eating as they fell. I knew this was coming. I just knew this was coming. This happens pretty much every time that he brings up some sort of food from the previous world. It always seems to hit her emotionally. Just like the whole chips thing and all that kind of stuff. It's just, she craves it so much. And so it makes sense that something that, even if it resembles it, and I would assume that Servaro, of anybody in this world, is going to be the best to possibly get close to it. It seems like it indicates that she did a really good job of it, even though it's nowhere near it. But yeah, that would probably be even more impactful for her if it's even remotely close to it. Rudius thought it was pretty terrible. Rice, dry and tasteless. Miso soup salty. The fish was delicious enough, but it smelled awful and didn't even go with the lemon. A bad balance and not good at all. Japanese cuisine, from their memories, was more delicate flavor. Despite that, Nanahoshi continued to shovel it down through her tears. She didn't speak until she was finished, which didn't take long. It hurts. That poor girl. Thank you for the food. Hearing that was enough to know that he had made the right choice. I do sometimes get a little annoyed by how foodie obsessed Rudius gets, but I understand that mindset that going to a world like this, they're not going to have a lot of the seasonings and niceties that we have these days that we take advantage of. In that world, and so there could be a time where that feels like you miss having all those nice spices and stuff that we just take for granted here, and having just even a close, remote taste of it would be emotional. But again, it's more so in the fact that it attaches itself to your memories. Just simply having these plates before her, it's like she can go back in time. I'm at home, sitting there with my family, eating my food. It's heartbreaking. After their meal, they wrapped up the afternoon lecture. Servaro was a good teacher, and lessons were interesting. While nothing major yet, they'd surely start to absorb the concepts sooner or later. Following classes, he needed to do some revisions to prepare for the next class. He spent time exploring the floating fortress. It was massive, and he wouldn't be able to see it within a day or two. He was in awe of how something this massive could fly. Rudius spotted Zenoba and Cliff wandering around, but they didn't invite him. Hey Zenoba, Master Cliff, what are you two doing together?
Oh, Master, actually, I was wandering the halls, and Lord Cliff called me over.
Yeah, this got my attention, so Rudius was relieved that they weren't hanging out specifically. He wasn't ditched. He was human, one that enjoyed to flock with other humans. That was what made them the greatest mammals on land. As a group, they could be stronger together. Again, this is that indication of how Rudius has so changed this idea that before, he didn't want to be around anybody, and now he just like, he craves to be with others and doesn't want to be left out of anything, even though he leaves people out all the time. Rudius. Cliff indicated some stairs that were going down rather than up. So this place also had a basement, which makes it even more massive. And I have a massive amount of theories about that whole thing, and I think Rudius mostly gets into it. Rudius offered to come along if they wanted to explore it, but Cliff wasn't sure if they were allowed. They were given permission to explore the castle, but did it include the basement? Rudius knew that some like to keep their personal things in a basement. Yes, we do know that. But Zenoba pressed on, saying that it wouldn't be a problem. Perugius had said that they were free to enter any rooms if they weren't locked, and the stairs didn't have a door. While Perugius claimed there was unspoken rules about this kind of stuff, Zenoba wasn't convinced. Maybe being royalty, he wasn't used to having a room that nobody could enter. While the back and forth went on, Nanahoshi appeared suddenly. After inquiring what they were doing, they filled her in. To which she replied, "Sure you can. The doors he doesn't want you to enter are locked anyways. Have you ever opened one of them and gone inside?" "Yeah, last time I was here. I got to see a few of them." It must have been the last time that she visited with Orsted. The thought of that alone made Perugius' legs like jelly. He almost imagined him being there. Again, every time Orsted's brought up, he just freaks out. "You can't enter most of the rooms down there, since they're locked. But there's something interesting down there." "Something interesting?" "Something you boys probably would enjoy." Perugius hadn't heard someone use that "you boys" to collectively refer to him and his friends in a while. Nanahoshi seemed to be the sort to use that phrase all the time in their previous world. "You boys." "If you're that nervous, shall I guide you?" Perugius wasn't into it as much as the other two, but he didn't want to be left out. "Yes, please." The basement was even more massive than the main floors, and more maze-like, more complex as they made their way down several flights of stairs. It turned into what resembled a dungeon. This is where I was already getting my theories that I think this whole thing is like a castle that was built on top of a labyrinth, or a labyrinth was built under a castle, and then at some point it just kind of got scooped up and became this floating castle. Which makes me wonder, is it only within the confines of this space? Because I've had a theory here and there, which I don't think is necessarily true anymore because they sort of blew away this theory with the idea of the teleportation labyrinth being a labyrinth that connected to a teleportation ruins. But I did have a theory at some point that this idea that maybe as you get deeper or at some point of it, it could become its own dimension. So even though this castle is this big, with the island this castle's on is this big, maybe if you go down so many flights of stairs, it's almost like you're going past its limits because you're in sort of a different dimension. But I don't necessarily think they're indicating that quite yet. But it does make you wonder if this idea of it being alive, just similar to like the teleportation labyrinth and how it kind of moved itself or dug itself into other areas, or monsters dug it into other areas, does it eventually like come out of the bottom of it? This is that kind of fear that I have in this idea of ever being in something like this, a floating island, and going down into the ground of the floating island, is this fear of just falling out the bottom of it. That's like a weird internal fear that I have. It's weird, I know. Reese wondered if the top was more for the guests, while the fortress was actually underground. Led by Nanahoshi, they wandered the halls, trying several rooms, most locked, others empty. He wondered how many stairs it went down. It grew darker and more dank. Doors became fewer and more split pathways and turns to take. The floors even sloped here and there, making it more like a labyrinth. There it is. Corridors weren't clean this far down, and mice ran across your feet. It seemed like an unused part of the fortress. Nanahoshi requested a lamplight spirit before proceeding further.
I'm not familiar with this type of architecture. For me not to recognize it, it must mean that it's from before the Great Human-Demon War. Or,
hey, Silent, are you sure you're not lost?
Nope, I'm fine.
Zenoba was finding enjoyment observing the design, but Cliff seemed to be losing his patience. Despite how entertained he was at first, at some point, they stopped checking rooms.
Oh, this is positively amazing. It's a rare opportunity to be able to visit a place like this. See, Master? Look at the way these stones are arranged. This is a special way of layering them. At a glance, they almost look random, but they're all natural. None of them are artificially altered, but considering they're part of the basement, supporting the castle this enormous, it's baffling how the place is still standing. You don't really see stones like this on our continent. I don't have much of an interest in architecture, but the mysteries of this place are captivating. I have to wonder exactly why they chose this kind of method.
He inquired Perugius about the pattern, which turned out to be block pattern piling. He explained to Zenoba that they were cut in a rectangular shape and piled together in an alternating pattern. He knew that it enhanced the stability in the corners. Seeing block pattern piling was quite a shock. He wondered if someone in the Warring States periods built this castle. But no, it wasn't a Japan-only technique. Surely people came up with this method as well. Stone architects were pretty common in this world. Yeah, that's one of those things where, yeah, maybe, but at the same time, what they kind of run into later on sort of does indicate this idea of, again, this concept of somebody being from another world long years past. After another flight of stairs, the atmosphere shifted. No longer a labyrinth, instead wandering down a corridor with a single door. It resembled the front of the audience chamber, with an armored dragon king crest engraved on it. It gave an impression something precious and valuable was hidden within. I kind of note that whole thing, that why that, it kind of indicates this idea of it possibly being this fortress that was from ancient times in the world of the dragonfolk. It head in? Nope, this is our destination. Nanahoshi barely touched the door before it gave a creak. A vast room with no doors lay within. Surely something so deep within contained something secret inside the walls.
As childish as this might sound for a man my age, I'm excited.
Cliff nodded. Me too. Reese as well. I knew you boys would enjoy this. She misunderstood. There are boys out there that detest this kind of thing, or had no interest. Not Rudius, though. You used to not. Cliff entered, unable to hold his curiosity. Rudius behind him, with a lamplight spirit, illuminating the area. A small sight awaited them when they entered the room.
What is this? It's incredible.
Zenoba scrambled to a mural on a wall. These had to be pretty old. The paint was chipped in places, but thanks to the stone's durability, the paints weren't indecipherable. Rudius wasn't aware of traditions of drawing murals like this in this world. It reminded him of the Egyptians.
I can't even begin to guess how ancient this must be. Master, this is an incredible discovery.
Calling it a discovery is a stretch. I'm pretty sure Lord Perugius already knows about these. It was hard to describe the paintings. They depicted a story. All murals featured one peculiar figure. Likely they were intended to depict what this person experienced in their life. There was no words to go with the paintings, so it's hard to guess what the scene or circumstances they were trying to convey. There were inverted mountains, people with wings, people worshipping what looked like a king, a floating stone, people gathered together, a dragon flying, two people cuddling close to a baby, a fallen shadow, a mournful king, a rage-filled king, people consulting one another, and then an eerie shadow standing behind a group of people. Wow. Is it that simple? Are we doing something that simple? The final painting, which most likely represented the conclusion of the story, was only half finished. And it was anyone's guess as to what the artist tried to depict. Yeah, I don't like these kind of things, the prophecy things that's just kind of spelled out. I mean, yes. And yes, chat, shut up. Chat, zippy zips. Yes, I mean, you can easily play this out to being Rudius' story. Like, is this a ancient prophecy that Rudius would show up and this is their whole story? I mean, putting Rudius aside, because there's a way that you could probably play this out to it possibly being Rudius' story. Like, eventually we're going to run into inverted mountains. We're going to run into skyfolk. We're going to have, run into a person that people are worshiping as a king. The floating stone could be an indication of the floating fortress. Running into a dragon at some point. This is going to be something I'm probably going to put to the side and constantly be monitoring as a possibility of some sort of laying out of a prophecy. I hope that it's not that simple. My hope is more in the idea that this possibly is a prophecy that has been long overdone. And maybe something like this, what I mean by that is the earlier segments. Inverted mountains, people with wings, sky folks. I'm not sure exactly what the inverted mountains would be other than maybe an underground location. People worshiping what looked like a king. Maybe something like the dragon god himself before he started going around destroying a bunch of stuff. The two people cuddling with the baby is where I start to kind of push in the idea of Rudius himself, but that could be maybe the story of the man god himself, like I said, with Laplace. And like I said, that could possibly mold in with Rudius' story and the idea of, if we're going into the idea of the apostles of the man god himself, because he specifically says, eerie shadow standing behind a group of people. The group of people could be what they were signifying before with the whole archway. There are people like you in this world. People that are possibly marked by the man god to communicate with him and to, yes, possibly be controlled by the man god. That eerie shadow could be the man god, and those could be his chosen people. And then what that plays into is the conclusion, which is not quite drawn yet. I hope this isn't just, here comes Rudius' story. I would like to actually spend some time and see if I can possibly connect a lot of this stuff to the history that has been spoken so far. At first thought, I don't really see connections so far. Other than the floating fortress, Chaos Breaker being the floating stone, two people cuddling close to a baby, yes, obviously we immediately think of Rudius, Sylphie, and Lucy, or possibly their future child being a boy. Maybe that's what Perugius was seeing with this whole thing, and that's why he wanted to see that child, because maybe he thinks this might be the prophecy child. The fallen shadow could be the spaceman incident. It could be Rudius arriving there. The mournful king could possibly be Saros. It's a nice thing that this is vague enough that it's hard to really place it to a specific subject. It would only be in placing it together with a series of events that I think it will actually connect. And again, I hope this isn't. I don't like prophecy things like this. I'm sorry, I don't like prophecy things like this. Now, I'm not as bothered by it because it's vague enough. It's not too obvious. But we'll see. We'll see. Now, the only thing that makes me believe that a lot of this stuff is attached to the past is, yes, that they technically bring up the idea that they've seen this story before. I mean, if we go just based on the history lesson that we really got in the second volume, the first part about the floating stone and the people gathering and the dragon flying, that could be really around the ancient age of the gods, where you had the dragon god kind of invading all the different worlds. The two people cuddling with the baby and the fallen shadow and the mournful king could possibly be Kishirika's defeat. I mean, having Barigati upset of Kishirika, his fiance, dying. Not really sure what the two people cuddling close to a baby would be. A rage-filled king and people consulting with each other would probably be where Kishideka came back, and she's angry, and she starts gathering people to fight again. And then, yes, the eerie shadow standing behind a group of people could possibly be Laplace's war, where you have Laplace is basically controlling other people, like the Superds, to go out and fight. The thing that makes me kind of keep thinking about this whole thing is really the fact that they kind of point out this. I've seen this story somewhere before. So it implies that this has been mentioned before, and so it's bugging me going, crap, I'm possibly missing something. Or maybe it's a story they've read that Reus hasn't talked about yet, or Refugent hasn't talked about yet. A creak echoed behind them. It was Armamph and Perugius.
What are you doing down here?
Oh, it's you, Lord Perugius.
Cliff and Zenoba knelt down. Reus lowered his head, but found Nanahoshi still standing. Someone needed to teach this girl some etiquette. Reus wondered why Perugius was here. Perhaps he was pissed they came down here.
Enough. Stand up.
Forgive us. As we were exploring your magnificent castle, we happened to wander down here. And lo behold, as it was expected, such a grandiose fortress. Even the basement holds enough mystery to make one's heart pound. I never dreamed we would find something like this here.
Reus nodded along. Zenoba came in handy in times like this, and he probably meant everything he said.
However, I am afraid we allowed our curiosity get the better of us, and offended you in process. With Nanahoshi as our guide, we figured we could wander down here, so long as we didn't open any locked doors. But we must have ventured too far without realizing it.
I don't mind. As for these murals, I wasn't the one who created them.
Nanahoshi flashed a triumphant look, as if saying, see, I was right, it'll be fine. Look. Yep. I could actually picture it.
And what do you mean by that?
Turning to the wall, he had a distant look in his eyes, as if gazing to the past.
When I first obtained this floating fortress, there was almost nothing left inside. There was traces of what existed here, but it all faded and crumbled away.
Perugius stared at the wall as he spoke. Eyes narrowing, he traced his fingers across it.
The only thing left intact was these wall paintings, and they've stayed in good condition ever since. Everything else wasted away. And from them, I realized our ancestors had a message they wanted to pass on, a story they wanted their predecessors to inherit.
Perugius turned to Reus
and continued, that's why I haven't locked this door to this room. If someone comes here wanting to see them, I have no reason to refuse. Of course, only one such person like that has ever appeared.
I really wish Reus grabbed onto this. I really did. Because yes, there's the side that he's looking to Reus. If someone comes here wanting to see them, I have no reason to refuse. Of course, only one such person like that has ever appeared. Is it saying that only one person has come here to want to see it? Which that's not true, because Nanahoshi, Zenoba, Cliff, and Reus alone, that's 4. And I would assume people in the past have. Is it claiming that before this there was only one person, which was Nanahoshi? Or is he saying that he's only refused one person, which would be Orsted? The way that it's worded is weird. It's a really weird way of putting it. Or is he talking in response to what he believes the mural is talking about? Only one person like that has actually appeared. I don't think that would be it. That's a stretch right there. It's just all around what he says right here is just like, what are we talking about? But yes, it does sort of indicate this idea that part of this mural has something to do with Perugius. He's looking into the past, but he could be looking into the past as in when he first arrived there. But the possibility that some of this stuff is something that he can connect with.
We appreciate the explanation, and I'm glad to hear that we haven't offended you. We didn't necessarily come here to view the mural, but it does seem that our ancient ancestors are trying to pass something on by leaving this here. There is something deeply captivating about the idea.
I would like to agree with you, but I'm not fond of these paintings. There is something suffocating about them. They make me nauseated.
Well, to each their own, as they say. That aside, we shouldn't linger too long. I'm afraid I have little control of my strength. If I touch them, I might destroy them. It would be a shame.
Perugius hummed under his breath. Aramumphy, guide them back up.
As you command.
And they left, leaving Perugius behind. I do agree with Perugius here. There's two sides that I can see it being suffocating. One is this idea is if there's something about it, something that's written in it, he feels it's something that he can't control. There is an aspect of fate and prophecy that is suffocating. This idea that because it was wrote here, it has to come to pass. Whatever's on here, you cannot control because they've foreseen it. There's a suffocating aspect of it in that he feels powerless, despite having as much power as he has. If he sees something that might possibly show signs of some downfall, something bad's going to happen, something he doesn't want to happen at least, he might find that something that agitates him. I can't control this.
and I don't like looking at it because it tells me something I can't control. I like controlling what I'm fighting because I get strong. If I'm facing Laplace, I got strong and I defeated Laplace. And if I see Laplace again, I'm going to destroy them because I've gotten stronger, ready for him to come back. But this thing possibly tells him, you're not going to stop Laplace. Laplace is that eerie creature standing behind people. It is that person controlling a group of people that possibly will fight back against him, that will rise up and defeat him. That unpainted section is the unknown that they don't like to be there. I do see that connection there. And again, that does kind of lend itself this idea that Perugius is looking at something that's telling him what is possibly going to come to be. And he doesn't like it.
Anyways, they returned to the main floor, without Perugius, who remained there. He must have had his own feelings about those murals. Their group disbanded, and Perugius returned to his room. The sun set while they were exploring, and another day had ended. He wondered how long the classes would continue. It didn't matter how long they took from the university, as long as they attended homeroom. Still, Lucy and Zenith weighed on his mind. He didn't want to be away too long. Right now, though, he had to deal with what was in front of him. He doesn't know what's going on with Zenith, and Lilia would continue to look after Lucy. The only thing left for him to do was to practice and revise summoning magic. Again, it'd be really cool if he could do that. He's about to do that. He goes to get his notes, and the knock came at the door, and he's like, no, I want Radius to do this, and he keeps getting distracted. Sylphie slipped in and sat next to him, letting out a heavy exhale. Giving her some water, she looked more exhausted than usual. Things apparently weren't going well with Princess Ariel. Lord Perugius wasn't taking her very seriously. Ariel wanted Perugius in her camp, so she's going out of her way to list all the benefits that he would earn if he actually backed her and she ascended the throne. He could have a noble status, territory, or special accommodation if he wanted to engage in commerce in Asura. Of course, Perugius rebuffed her completely, saying he didn't need any of it. Again, it makes sense, and especially as we kind of see here in a little bit, Perugius doesn't care about all that stuff. He doesn't need all this stuff. She thinks he needs it. Everybody needs this stuff. Everybody would want this stuff. I'm going to give you something that everybody craves. He doesn't crave it. He doesn't care about that. All he cares about is Laplace. And plus, he has everything he really needs. Well, yeah, no wonder she's having troubles. What do you mean? I mean, he chose to live out here, away from all that. So either he's not interested in it, or it actively disgusts him. Huh? But I thought he chose to live out here because it's more convenient for stopping the demon god from ever rising again. Reese thought, he said that? Well, no doubt that was one reason. He spoke up. That's not what I mean. If he wants power, he's already in the position to take it for himself. He's the hero from the Laplace War, after all. Servato said that he found the formality of Asura court suffocating. If you were trying to reel him in with power and prestige, it's only going to blow up in your face. Rias thought if he wanted to leave the fortress, he could have done so. But he's been up here for decades. Surely Perugius has his reasons. Yes, you do have a point. Maybe Princess Ariel is being too impatient. Her voice trailed off for a moment. Hey, Rudy, what do you think we should do? That's a difficult question. Ruiz really had no clue. He felt Ariel was skipping a number of steps here. Normally, a person would cultivate friendships before asking for favors. If they weren't willing, then you could offer more conditions in return. Ariel had benefited from her charisma, using it to make connections. She never faced someone that could resist her charms before. Like I said earlier, this is literally her being challenged for once. She's always had pretty much everything she wanted, despite the crown. But every person in front of her that she could manipulate, it was just very easy for her. Now she's got to learn how to actually communicate this kind of stuff. Now, that's not giving her enough credit. I understand that. Like the whole thing with the whole learning different types of folktales and stuff like that, that's where she's actively learning things in order to, you know, gain favor from people and earn relationships. And it's like, yeah, you kind of did it there. You can kind of do it here as well. You're too busy trying to offer things rather than just make a connection first. Perugius and Nanahoshi were built differently. Reese was probably in the same category as them. He was happy to do something for Sylphie's sake, but he wasn't that inclined Ariel to help out. It's been a while, folks. It's been a while, folks. Let's get back into this whole thing again. But I wasn't that inclined Ariel to help out. Oh, 7 Cs, you never fail to amaze me. There's our regular scheduled what the heck 7 Cs. I'm guessing it's implying he's not that inclined to help Ariel like he would do for Sylphie. He's happy to do anything for Sylphie, but Ariel, it's different. First, I think she should improve her relationship with Perugius. Improve? Improve it? How? By sharing his hobbies or asking him about heroic stories from the past. Hobbies? Or in heroic stories? Okay, I think I understand. It might help you to bring Zenoba along. I think Perugius likes him most of all. Zenoba could carry a conversation, and she could just nod along. That would probably improve his perception of her.
Okay, I'll try telling Her Highness what you said. Don't take me too serious, though. I'm not infallible. I appreciate the advice regardless. She chuckled and gave him a peck on the cheek. He thought about throwing his studies aside and making another baby, but he pushed that aside. He couldn't get distracted. Again, you're behind everybody else and you're supposed to be getting better. By the way, how are things going with you, Rudy? So-so, I guess. He filled her in on everything. You're awfully nice to Nanahoshi, she grumbled. Hanging out with other girls was really a no-go after all. Zenoba and Cliff were present, so they weren't alone. But he did go out of his way to make her a meal. He needed to fix Sylphie's mood. He asked to hold her in his arms. But she looked away with puffed cheeks. Was she really pissed at him? Maybe this was the lull period people talked about in marriages. That cursed 3-year marriage mark. Just kidding. Sorry for pulling your leg like that, but you look like you were having so much fun talking to her, so I want to get back at you a little. She stuck out her tongue and threw her arms around him for a big hug. She was warm and petite. He loved the feel of her. Perhaps he deserved having her hate him, but nonetheless, he didn't want her to. He'd have to be more careful. That's kind of one of those things of like, when you think something's a joke, and you say it jokingly or teasingly, like obvious right here, Sylphie's being teasing with him. But there is that little element of the truth in there. It does seem like there's a little bit of truth in there. I'm just kidding, but it looked like you were having fun talking to her. So it's her pulling back and then going, but a little bit. So there is still a little bit of jealousy in there, which is understandable. But for Rudius' sake, he takes things a little bit too far. And so just a little bit of teasing, he's taking it further than really he should. But it's good that he's being cautious though. But it does kind of remind me back when Sylphie was first pushed to go after Rudius. She was sort of jealous of Nanahoshi. That's what kind of pushed her to keep going. There's something special between Rudius and Nanahoshi, and I think she still carries that even till now. Because as I said earlier, I think Sylphie knows that there's something else here between the two of them that she doesn't know about. Because she's already kind of came to the conclusion that Nanahoshi's from another world, this is probably the extra step in the idea of, now how does that pertain to Rudius? They said they have a similar homeland. They know each other, and they speak the same language. A language I've never heard before. It's obviously going to be something that she's going to come to a conclusion on, and I think she finds Nanahoshi the one, if any, that could take Rudius away from her, even though it's not technically true. But honestly, why are you so hung up on Nanahoshi anyways? Well, I know a lot about her situation and where she came from, so I want to help her out however I can. But it's not like I'm romantically interested or anything, okay? She chuckled. Yes, I know. Well, I should return to the princess. Keep working hard, Rudy. Yeah, I will. And you too. He thought, crap, I thought everything was going well. But Sylphie's frustration with him must have been piling in the background. This can't keep up. He thought it might be a good idea to put some distance between him and Nanahoshi. Again, he's taken it a way step too far. But again, he's sort of taking these hints from Sylphie. It's understandable. He thought maybe going out of his way to make Nanahoshi happy wasn't a good idea after all. As Sylphie opened the door, Nanahoshi was standing there. We have the trope. Insert another trope in the Mushoku Tensei. We have the trope. Girl opens a door to the rival at the front door. Realizing, why are you here? And it gets worse too. Nanahoshi spoke up. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude on the two of you, but she broke out in a coughing fit, clutching her throat and chest, her face contorted in pain. Sorry, I overheard everything. Don't worry, I have no interest in Rudy's. Sylphie responded. Okay, that's great, but are you all right? Her condition was far worse than he had seen. She was gagging like something was stuck in her throat. It only heightened their unease. It's just, my cough has gotten much worse. I went to Cliff to see if he could cast detoxification magic on me, but he was preoccupied with Elinalise. I thought I could get Rudius to do it instead. But if that's going to cause more of a misunderstanding, I'll just have to wait for Cliff to help me tomorrow. Sylvie responded, No, it's fine. Everything's fine. I'm not really that worried about it. As Nanahoshi turned to leave, Sylphie grabbed her by the shoulder. I can cast it on you, but if my magic is not effective enough, it might be a good idea to have Cliff cast a higher tier spell on you later. Thanks. I appreciate that, if you don't mind. All right, here goes. Sylphie pressed her hand on Nanahoshi's neck, silently casting detoxification. Reese figured that if he worked at it, he could probably eventually get to silent casting that as well. Sylphie tilted her head in confusion, while Nanahoshi continued to cough. What? This is kind of strange. My mana, what is this? Sylphie cocked her head to the other side and tried pressing the opposite hand on Nanahoshi's shoulder. In the meantime, Nanahoshi's coughing fit only got worse. Hey, is everything okay? Nanahoshi slapped her hand over her mouth. There was a sound of liquid spattering. A clot of blood fell to the floor. Freaking crap, I was knowing this was coming. I knew this was coming. Nanahoshi stared down silently at her hand, dazed.
Her brain couldn't seem to digest what she was seeing. She turned her palm towards Rudius, as if she thought that he had the answers. Her skin was coated in blood. A second later, she collapsed on the floor, unconscious. Oh, if this hurt so bad when I read it. And I knew it was coming, so maybe that kind of helped. They've been pretty much flagging this for a while now. I knew something was going on with her. Something that was probably foreign to this world, or something that is just really easy for most people of this world to not have a problem with. Which, yes, technically I've read in the next chapter, so I know what it is, so I don't need to get into it too much details, but that's sort of the direction I was going with. This idea of her being in this world and her not having an immunity, just something that's kind of natural in this world, something that this world has kind of gotten over. I wasn't really expecting it to get into details about the mana and everything like that. That's the other kind of added element to it, but it's interesting. What? Why? Rudius and Sylphie were frozen in place. Just now when I tried to pour my magic into her, why? I don't... Flecks of blood coated Sylphie's face as she stared down at Nanahoshi. Her skin was deathly pale. Rudius strode to Sylphie, calling to her, with a tremor in his voice. She flinched, eyes trembling in fear as she retreated a step. No, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything to her. Edging back as if into a corner, he followed her until her back was to a wall. Once she knew that she had nowhere to run, she squeezed her eyes shut. I know what I said a minute ago, but I only intended to tease you a little bit. But really, I would never do something like this. He pulled out a handkerchief, began wiping blood from her face. He continued to clean her hands. The worst vehicle for disease was bodily fluids. It wouldn't fix everything, but he couldn't leave her looking like that. Sylphie didn't try to resist, merely stood there, letting him work. It's okay, Sylphie. I watched your whole interaction with Nanahoshi. You didn't do anything wrong. Oh, okay. He was calm now. Seeing her lose composure helped him keep his. It's okay. You didn't do anything. Nanahoshi's been sick for a while, understand? Yes. Things just happen all of a sudden, with the worst possible timing. This is absolutely not your fault. That is so true. It is so true how this stuff just happens. Your day is going fine, and then suddenly a loved one, you get a call or something like that, somebody got in a car accident, somebody just has a heart attack suddenly, and you never expected it. If you could expect it, then you would have them at the hospital. It never happens when you're expecting it. Just bam, your life changes. Everything's fine, everything's in motion, and then suddenly, bam, your life completely gets flipped. And yes, sometimes it happens. Sadly, so many stories that, yes, it happens right after you say the worst thing. And it's like, I wish I could take that back. Which technically, Nanahoshi gets into in a minute. Oh, okay, but when I tried to use magic on her, there was something strange inside of her. It was like my mana wouldn't go through her. In fact, it just seemed to coalesce together or something. Blood was trickling down Nanahoshi's mouth and nose as she laid on the ground, unconscious. Her life could be in danger if they didn't get help. He needed to calm Sylphie down. No, perhaps he should order her to do something. It was best in a situation like this, when somebody's in a confused state, to give them some sort of order to snap them out of it. Listen to me, Sylphie. I need you to get help. Either Cliff or Lord Perugius. You want me to go? Yes, I'll watch over Nanahoshi and do whatever I can for her. But in the meantime, I need you to go get help. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. Clarity returned to her eyes, and she dashed off. Sylphie had faced carnage before, but that didn't prepare her for having an acquaintance throw up blood out of nowhere. Worse yet, happening right after she touched Nanahoshi. He knew his wife wasn't the type to hurt someone else, no matter how jealous she was. That said, sometimes she could be compulsive and, no, not possible. Despite what he told Sylphie, there was little emergency care that he can give Nanahoshi. He just had to do what he could. And that is chapter 3. It's a long recording just for chapter 3. This is going to be a one chapter episode, I guess. Ugh, I did not think this was going to go this long. There's just so much stuff. We did have people mention the idea that this could turn into one chapter Mushoku Mondays, as much as I don't want to do that because I want to keep going. But I can't kill myself in editing. But no, there's a couple things in here. Yes, I made the joke immediately when I read this to certain people. Oh my gosh, Sylphie killed Nanahoshi. I knew that wasn't going to be true. But I think when they start to explain how this disease works, yes, technically she did, but not intentionally. Technically, everybody was. Rudius has been doing it. Cliff has been doing that. All these people trying to help cure her disease was technically pumping mana into her. We haven't gotten to the strict details of it that I've read so far, but yes, they're technically pumping mana into her, and it seems like that might not have been the best thing. It's a very curious question, but yeah, it was a thing that initially came to my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, this girl got so jealous. And then Rudy's like, no, she's not the one that would do things like that. She has hurt people. Yeah, not out of jealousy, but because there's been plenty of opportunities for Sylphie to attack people out of jealousy. She could have done it to Linnea, Persena. Initially, Nanahoshi, when she was first, again, being pushed to actually reveal who she was to Rudius, there's a lot of opportunity that she could... When Rudius first brought Roxy in, Sylphie could have attacked her. She's not that type, so it makes sense. But it makes sense why that is the question mark here. Because, again, she was teasing Rudius about this. And again, while teasing, still noting the idea of a jealousy there. And so it would be obvious, especially for Rudius' perspective, as he's feeling that, crap, I need to chill out with Nanahoshi, I'm going to mess things up. Maybe I should stop doing things for Nanahoshi. Even though she was teasing, he was taking it seriously. So of course, when this whole thing happens, and it's very violent, somebody's spitting up blood, that's not good. Spitting up blood means that something internal is damaged, and that is often death. And so yes, it's a very violent process that's happening here, and there's a fear there that something may have happened. But I like that he kind of assessed the situation. The first things first, get the blood off of Sylphie. That's actually a very important thing, especially when you're dealing with somebody, a medical emergency or something like that. That's why a lot of people wear gloves and stuff like that, because it's the easiest way for you to contract whatever they have. Even if it's not the thing that's causing the problem, you can contract something very dangerous. So he's very quick to think that. I kind of wonder if in Japanese schools and stuff like that, they teach that as like a first aid thing at a young age or something like that. You could have learned that from the internet and stuff like that as well, watching shows or whatever. But I also like the fact that it kind of hints on that idea of, yeah, sometimes because of somebody else being in a panic state, that can often keep you kind of level-headed. You're kind of counterbalancing each other. Like, crap, this person's going crazy. I gotta calm them down. And in a sense, you're calming down. But me personally, my mindset was like, just yell Aramafi. Like, and I like how like it starts the next chapter with Aramafi showed up. It's like, yes, just yell Aramafi. He'll just appear in an instant and tell where she needs to go or something like that. Yeah, this hurt. And again, I've been seeing this coming for quite a while now, and it sucks that it comes in a situation like this where there are hinting at teasing and jealousy and stuff like that, and Rudius has his doubts and his fears that he's being too kind to somebody else, and that's causing a problem in this relationship. It's just not a good time. Like he says, things like this happen at the worst time possible. You never can predict it, and sometimes it's almost as if fate causes tragedy to happen at the worst time possible. Like I said earlier, you say something nasty to somebody, and then boom, it happens, and it sucks. But yeah, super bad stuff. Super bad stuff. I really don't want to do this. I want to keep going, but let me double check this chapter. I think it's long too. Yeah, it's decently long. I'm sorry. I will just leave the next chapter for the next Mushoku Monday and move on from there. As per usual, just I kind of had the feeling when I was reading it, I was like, holy crap, this chapter's hella long. Like I get past the whole Elinalise thing, and it goes right into talking about summoning, and then it goes right into Nanahoshi and having the dinner, and then it goes right into the ruins, and then it gets into the Egyptian writing and stuff like that on the wall, and it gets into this jealousy stuff, and then it gets right into Nanahoshi, and it's just like it keeps compounding on itself. But yeah, we'll see where things go. But for now, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Mondays as always. If you did, make sure that like button down there before you leave. Additionally, thanks to the chat for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. As per usual, greatly appreciate all the support monetarily, kind words, the super chats, the memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Thank you guys so much. You're so amazing. Again, thanks to the mods for hanging out and helping this be a clean experience for us to all enjoy together. Per usual, recording this on the same day as Mushoku Monday, so bad chat last week. People being upset about how I pronounce Perugius, I don't care. I'm so used to people getting so worked up about pronunciations. You only have to say it once, by the way. Certain people in the chat, you don't have to say it every damn time. This is not live, by the way. This is a premiere, so if you yell about something, it's not going to change in the video. But no, that is a thing, because like I don't like to look up names if it's very unique looking in Google or whatever, because sometimes it'll just come up with a character and I don't want to see spoilers. Google doesn't recognize Perugius, so it's not. The anime itself is Perugius is something like that. And honestly, Perugius is just a very quick way of saying it. I'm just not overemphasizing every vowel, but I'm probably going to continue to say Perugius. I'm sorry. Just gonna have to get over it. It's just how I've always read it. That's how I've always seen it. I say it quickly. It's not a big deal. You know who I'm talking about. What do the characters have Peru in something? So anyways, I might eventually force myself to say Perugius, but I don't think so. Automomphy says Perugius. And Rudius says Perugius, something like that. So, but like I said, Perugius is, that's what I'm saying, Perugius. Just saying Perugius very quickly. So, it's okay. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Greatly appreciate the support. And until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. Sylphie tilted her head and Silty Serval knowledge. Silvaril met with Silvaril. Don't ever have. Although Lilia hadn't give Rudius the details, she was only. Although